Hello, my name is Ibrahim Aman Maglangi Jr. In this video, I will be presenting one of the Philippines' finest heritage houses and the closest thing that we have to, besides Intramuros, vegan Kali Crisologo, and an old video footage, a time machine, the magnificent and splendid MiraNila house. So for this video, I will cover here the basic facts of the house, its further description and history of the site and structure, the stories associated with the house, its cultural value, and how it is preserved now. At its best, preservation engages the past in a conversation with the present, over in mutual consent for the future. So says by the late William Murtagh, known as the Lion of Historic Preservation. Located in Barangay Bagong Lipunan in Cubao, Quezon City, it was built in 1929 atop Mariposa Hill, then a part of San Juan Rizal, by Conrad Benitez, a former senator and one of the drafters of the 1935 Constitution, alongside his wife Francisca Benitez, co-founder of the Philippine Women's University. It spans an area of 5,482.23 square meters or 1.35 acres. It stands at, from its base up to its tower, 12.19 meters or 40 feet tall. Its latest owner was Helena Benitez, who passed away in 2016. It was declared a heritage house by the National Heritage Commission of the Philippines, or NHCP, on the 7th of April 2011, and it is one of the few houses in Metro Manila that was declared a heritage house, one of the other being the Lichauco Heritage House in Santa Ana, Manila. The MiraNila house now functions as a museum, library, and an events venue, particularly for weddings, for birthdays, and many more. The MiraNila Heritage House was designed by architect Gregorio Paredes, Francisca's cousin, when the Benitez couple called for his service, with the aid of architect Juan M. Arellano as well. The main house has 2 stories and a tower that adds up another 2 stories. It served as a vantage point where one can see as far as the Manila city proper, such as Intramuros, Ermita, Escolta, Binondo, especially back when skyscrapers were not a thing yet in the old Manila skyline. The house was designed with a mix of Art Deco and Italian Florentine architectural style, taking inspiration from the trips and countries they have gone through. Additionally, the house also has resemblance to the mission-style architecture found in what was then Spanish California. The first structure to be built in the site was the 2-story reinforced concrete structure with tegula-tiled roofing and its accompanying tower. The house followed the patterns and foundations of a Florentine villa, illustrated in magazines given by Felicine Tirona, Francisca's sister, from her trips in Europe. The house has a grand living room with a revolving staircase on the side that exudes grandeur. Then there is the family's library and study area on the 2nd floor. MiraNila houses a collection of antique furniture such as antique jars and a grandfather clock in a corner, artwork such as the family's portraits painted by the country's finest artists such as Pablo and Fernando of Orsolo, Macario Vitalis, Fabian de la Rosa, Diosdado M. Lorenzo, and many more, and books including Filipiniana, reference, and law books. It also keeps manuscripts, some dating back to the 1800s. In MiraNila's earlier days, there were no roads for vehicles yet leading to the property, and so if you're planning to visit the Benitez household at that time, vehicles would have to park on a lot that belongs to Doña Sisang de Leon, where the LVN Pictures compound stands now. Guests then would have to walk on foot for less than a kilometer towards Juan Mariposa, the original address of the MiraNila house. Right across one Mariposa was Two Mariposa, the 3-hectare estate of future Secretary of Justice Jose Abad Santos, which was able to acquire at 50 centavos per square meter in 1932 upon the entreaties of his best friend, Dean Conrado Benitez. The site where the MiraNila house stands used to be, according to Jose Abad Santos' son Pepito, in Desiree Cua Benipayo's excellent biography, Honor, the Legacy of Jose Abad Santos, a bird sanctuary. Big butterflies inhabited the area and thus the name Mariposa Hills. It also used to be a site where families would go to for retreats, especially families belonging to the higher tiers of Philippine society to wind up. Additionally, according to Augusto F. Villalon in his book Lugar, San Juan del Monte was originally known as a weekend retreat where Manila residents built country houses as a respite from city life. MiraNila, however, was purposely built as the principal residence of the Benitez family, who previously lived in the gentry side of Paco, Manila, specifically in a block bounded by Santo Sepulcro, Peña Francia, and Union Streets, with the Laurel and Yulo families as their neighbors. The house was named MiraNila when, being the aforementioned vantage point that acts like a tower to the Manila skyline, their daughter, Helena Benitez, born in 1914, witnessed from atop the tower a large fire in Intramuros in 1932 that severely damaged the old Ateneo de Manila campus there. According to them, Helena screamed, "Mirar a Manila," or "Look at Manila," in Spanish as she looked at the flames. And through a series of wordplay, the house got the name MiraNila. The fire from Intramuros did not reach the house and was spared from the catastrophe, fortunately. However, the catastrophe that took place in the house was when the Japanese forces invaded the country. They took interest in the house as they found it situated in a very strategic position of the city, especially with the presence of its tower. And thus, the Japanese occupied the house. But despite the presence of the Japanese in the Benitez property, the Benitez matriarch refused to leave the house, fearing that the Japanese might ransack the place. Still, like the aforementioned Intramuros fire in 1932, the MiraNila house managed to survive the onslaught of the Second World War. Eventually, the Benitez family reclaimed the house in the 1950s. They were relieved that the bombs that the Japanese planted in the property did not explode. Now, the bomb shelter was converted into a storage room for stuff that are too valuable to be disposed. The house also bore witness to the significant civic works and professional interests of the Benitez family. Conrado Benitez founded the University of the Philippines College of Business Administration and was the first dean of the aforementioned college. He also co-founded the Philippine Rural Reconstruction Movement, and most importantly, he was one of the drafters of the 1935 Constitution. Francisca Benitez, on the other hand, co-founded the Philippine Women's University in 1919. It was the first university for women in Asia, founded by Asians, and was president of the university for 45 years. To date, the family has retained management of the non-stock, non-profit, and non-sectarian school. The Benitez matriarch also founded the acclaimed PW-led Bayanihan folk dance troupe on the request of President Carlos B. Garcia, who needed a group to represent the Philippines in the 1958 Brussels World Fair. After the deaths of the Benitez couple, MiraNila's ownership was transferred to their daughter, Helena Benitez, a Filipina academic, administrator of the Philippine Women's University, and eventually senator from 1967 until 1972, and a member of the Batasang Pambansa from 1978 until 1986. Helena managed to maintain and preserve the MiraNila house in the midst of Manila's changing cityscape and its accompanying urban sprawl and congestion. However, some parts of the Benitez property was sold to developers who built modern residential structures nearby MiraNila. Unfortunately, due to Manila's changing cityscape over time, no one in the present day can get to enjoy a panoramic view of Manila from the house's tower anymore, as Helena, her siblings, and her parents did 93 years ago, as the view is now obstructed by the skyscrapers of nearby cities of Mandaluyong and Makati. Now that we learn about the house's history and its owners, the house has a somewhat historical value, as it is the residence of one of the most prominent figures in Philippine society. It bore witness to the important civic works and professional interests of the Benitez household, so said by Amelu Benitez Reyes, one of Helena's nieces and the eldest of the third generation. Especially during the time when skyscrapers did not dominate the Manila skyline yet, the MiraNila house also boasts a strategic position in Manila, situated atop Mariposa Hill, where one can take a view of the city. It is the strategic position for the reason that the Japanese occupied the house. To step into MiraNila is to step back in time. Since the death of Helena Benitez in 2016, the MiraNila house was converted into a museum and library under the efforts of her descendants, Purissima or Betty Benitez Johanot, Bebet McClelland, Laika and husband Nick Brown, and Asuncion Sonny Benitez Rush, daughters of Helena's brother Thomas. The old garage has now been converted into an events venue and a gift shop, whilst the open area beside the house can also be utilized for outdoor events. Outside the house itself, the area has been maximized as well as a way to attract visitors and generate funds for the house's maintenance. Despite, and thanks to, the MiraNila's house is reused from being a residential structure to a combination of a museum, library, and eventually an events venue, the property has been preserved very well. They got to maintain its original state, or in other words, how it looked during its early years, from the spiral pillars, porch lights, and cast iron windows to the antique cabinets, burnished wooden staircase, and white arches dividing the space between the library and the living room. And that is all for my video presentation about the MiraNila house. I hope you have learned something from this video. This is Ibrahim Maglang Jr. and thank you very much for watching.